The viceroy butterfly, that's this one here. You say, well, it's a monarch. No, it's not. Look at this bar on the back wing. That tells you that's a viceroy. It's smaller than a monarch. It's not related to a monarch. It's not toxic, but it mimics the monarch so that it gets some protection, because the monarch is a toxic butterfly that feeds on toxic food, milkweeds. The viceroy butterfly overwinters as a third instar larva. That's a very small larva, about that long. And in the fall, as the temperatures get shorter, this little caterpillar takes a leaf and it cuts the leaf into a very small shape and folds it over itself into a tube and attaches it with silk to the food plant. So it's attached to the willow that it wants to feed on. Here they are. I'm going to pass this around. These are living caterpillars hibernating inside their little silk tubes in a leaf attached to the willow plant. This is how all viceroys in Iowa are right now in this stage. And these little guys are hanging out there in 20 below zero, blowing in the wind all winter. And think about that. They don't seem to dry out. They come out the next spring. And guess what? They're on their food plant. They haven't fallen off. Why haven't they fallen off? They made a little silk band around the stem so that the leaf that they made into this tube can't fall off. And if you look carefully, you'll see that little silk band. So I'm going to hand this around. There's 4 of them in here, along with the stem they're attached to, so you can see how they're attached. And we'll just pass this around one row to the next. So that's just a little thought about, since we've been through winter, I thought I'd bring that out now. But I want to ask you a few questions now. How many of you, let's have a show of hands, how many of you have raised a moth or butterfly from an egg? Good. How many from a larva? How many from a pupa? Found pupa out in the wild? Good. How many of you have been to the Nature Center and taken live caterpillars or eggs or pupae home that I put out on for a giveaway? Nobody? You have.
We didn't know better.
Well, I want you to watch this. Keep coming back to your Nature Center, because I'm constantly, during the growing season, bringing eggs, larvae, pupae in and putting them on top of my display out there. And those are to take home. They're free. So if you want them, get them. And they're free of disease because I produce the eggs in my own insectary. They are free of disease. You can just get 20 or 30. Finding 20 or 30 eggs of a lot of these butterflies can be pretty tough. But you can get them right here. So, and all of these were available in our Nature Center this last year. And others too.
When do you start bringing them?
I'll start bringing them here about 2 or 3 weeks from now, because I'm just bringing out the first pupae, which are always the black swallowtail. That's because I can keep this one going all year round, right through. And we've had them in here. We've had caterpillars in this Nature Center of the black swallowtail in my exhibit in December, until middle December. And I go out and I get these plants, and they've been through several hard freezes, but they feed on plants that can take that kind of cold. And so you gather up this somewhat wilted parsnip leaves, and they eat them, and I can keep producing them. So keep that in mind. At the Nature Center, we'll have eggs and larvae and pupae available. It's hard, you can't predict when it'll be. Eggs hatch in like 2 or 3, 4 days. So you've got to keep coming on a regular basis to make sure you see everything. How many of you have something like have tried to make, let's put it that way, a butterfly garden?
Is it always on willow?
To attract butterflies. Okay. I'm going to talk about that today. I'm also going to talk about what to do with eggs or larvae you find in the wild, or with eggs or larvae you get here, how to raise them. Now, the first part of it I'm going to talk about is how to develop a butterfly garden. And the first thing I have to say is that the most important thing for a butterfly is the habitat. Habitat is everything for butterflies. Now, Iowa, what does Iowa look like? Iowa is cornfields, soybean fields, concrete, buildings. None of this is of interest. Lawns, no interest by butterflies. When a butterfly is flying, it's looking for habitat. Now that's not to say butterflies will fly through an area to get to another and just happen upon an area that's got some nectar plants in it. But the more that area looks like a native habitat or has varied plants in it, the more likely it is to have butterflies in it. So, think about what your yard looks like. Is there a lot of lawn? For most people, there probably is. Can you ever make that into a habitat? Yes, but most people don't want to get rid of the lawn because it's the easiest way to take care of a piece of land. So, what do? Do we plant natives? Think about it a moment. Natives would seem like a good thing to do because you're attracting native insects. The problem with natives is many of them bloom over a short span. And if you're a perennial garden, you have a big perennial garden, you know that most of those perennials bloom over a short span too. So, okay, you don't have a big garden or don't want to make a big garden, don't have a lot of energy to keep a lot of land in good form for butterflies and moths. What can most people do with yards they have, which have a lot of grass, very frankly, lawn? There are only a few plants that are really good for a yard like that because you do not have the habitat. And it also depends on where your house is. If you're in the middle of town, it means one thing. If you're on the edge of a forest, it means another. If you're out in the middle of a field, like you're a farmer, that means something else. You're going to get different butterflies in these different places. You aren't going to get a forest-loving butterfly like the mourning cloak out on a farm, not on an open farm. No, you're not going to see these. On a rare occasion you might, but you're not going to see those on a regular basis. So you need to keep track of think of what kind of habitat you have around your house as well as what you've got on your land. And for most people, they want to keep a yard that's fairly low maintenance. What is the best thing you can do for a yard like that? You have not got the habitat. You pick flowers, plants that have a lot of attractive value. Not native plants, mostly. The best plant, if you had only one, would be the buddleia, butterfly bush. It is the attractor. And if it is in a yard with any other native plant, the butterflies will come to it more than anything else. Now, just any butterfly bush? No, sorry. Don't look at the catalogs. I'll have butterflies pinned on all the flowers of all the different colors of these things. A lot of those butterfly bushes do not have enough nectar or for some reason are not attractive to the butterflies. The blue and lavender and white do not attract them very much. They aren't worth growing, from my opinion. The light pink ones are also not much opinion, in my opinion. The ones to get, in my opinion, are the raspberry colored ones. Now I have probably 30 big butterfly bushes and I keep them in pots. And I force some of them early in a greenhouse to get them to come out early enough so that I can have butterflies earlier than they are outdoors. But this particular plant is not horribly hardy in Iowa. If you are out in a field, in a farmyard, it is probably going to winter kill on you. So it'd be a good idea to protect this plant for the winter with a rose cone or something similar, or mulch it heavily, or cover it with something so that it gets some protection from our winters. It's hardy, but our winters are just pretty severe. That is, if you have a wonderful backyard with lots and lots of flowers, you're a perennial flower grower and you love perennials, grow what you want, because your yard is going to have what they're looking for, the variety of plants of different heights and in different blooms types. You don't need to worry too much about attracting butterflies. But even if you have that kind of yard, and I do, I have no lawn in back of my house. Even then, you want to have butterfly bushes because they are always attracted to the butterflies, and they can pull them in to an area that doesn't have otherwise ideal habitat for them. If they're coming through and they smell a butterfly bush, and these do have fragrance, then they will make a beeline. They might land on your phlox or land on something else nearby, penstemon or something like that. But sooner or later, they're going to end up in the butterfly bush, and they'll spend more time on that than anything else. The other advantage of the butterfly bush is it's not seasonal. Once it starts blooming, it doesn't quit until it freezes. And it gets big. It gets about 3-4 feet in Iowa. They'd get up to 8 feet tall if we didn't have the winters we got. But expect it to be about 3 or 4 feet. So that, of all the things you do, if you want to attract butterflies to your yard, forget all the native stuff and everything. Butterflies can find plenty of that in the wild. Make a whole row of butterfly bush. Then you're going to have butterflies, I guarantee you. Lots of them. And then, another thing you need to consider is plants that butterflies might possibly lay eggs on. Now, there aren't too many choices. You could plant plants that are for butterflies that aren't very attractive, or moths that aren't very attractive, but most of you want, I think, to have plants that would be suitable for larger butterflies that are more colorful. Something like the black swallowtail. Everybody who has a butterfly garden should have something in the carrot family in their yard. Now, if you're got a vegetable garden, you got a row of carrots, that's fine. They'll find it, don't worry. And will they hurt your carrots? No. Will they eat them down to the ground? No, because if they try to do that, the birds are going to find them. So butterflies have an instinct, their caterpillars have an instinct that never to take too much out of one plant. They start to move and go to another one so that it doesn't look like anybody's feeding there. Because birds are very keen to look at leaves that have been stripped. So certainly a parsley is probably the best of those, because it doesn't bolt the seed. You could go dill or fennel or caraway. Any of those are fine. Parsnip. If you're growing parsnips for food, hey, they're perfect for these. In fact, our wild parsnip is their main food plant here in Iowa. So they are around. Now, will you see this guy in your yard? If you're in the country, you will. Now, if you're in the city, you won't, because this is a guy. Guys don't hang around unless there's something that's suitable for the girls. They want girls, and they aren't going to go in your yard if it doesn't have the kind of habitat they want, which is open land. So if you're in town, and you have a parsley plant, don't expect to find him. You're going to find the girl, and the girl doesn't have anywhere near as much yellow on her. But she sneaks into town to lay some eggs because she knows, not because she knows anything, but because that's an opportunity for her to lay eggs on something that's remote from these wild areas where there may be more parasites or predators involved. She'll go into more areas than a male will. And the same with the monarchs. Think about habitat again. A monarch's habitat is where there's lots of milkweed, open country. Now can you take a place in the middle of a forest like this and put a sign up that says pollinator monarch zone? You can do that. I guarantee you the butterflies don't read signs. You'll get monarchs anyway. You will get monarchs, but you're not going to get a lot of them. If you want monarchs, you've got to have open land, and that's where you're going to find the guys. Now, if you have a yard that doesn't have a lot of lawn, and you have lots of flowers, and you have lots of milkweed around, you'll know you've made it if you see a male monarch cruising your yard and landing just on the leaves of a shrub or something to rest. And then you disturb him, and he's going to fly around your yard again and eventually come back to that same spot. That means that male has staked out a territory. And it also means that he selected your yard as his territory, which means that you have good habitat. Okay? And I get monarchs like that every summer in my backyard. And I'm nowhere near an open field, so you can do this. But you've got to have a lot of variety in your yard, a lot of different kinds of things. If you have a vegetable garden, that's great. It's plants in different stages and different appearance. It's that variety of growth. And then if you have flowers, you got to have flowers to attack them too. And hopefully food plants. You better have some milkweed there if you want monarchs. So it's about habitat. And I want to warn you, there's an awful lot of money being made by people who sell plants or sell pollinator zones and so on. There's money in that. They're trying to go on your ignorance that you just don't know enough about butterflies to know better. What you're looking for is habitat. And if you can produce, if you don't have the habitat, pick only a few things that you really need. The butterfly bush, some milkweed, and by the way, milkweed, what do you want? Do you want the field milkweed? Do you want the stuff you see in the fields all over Iowa? Have you ever looked at the root system of those? Yeah. Let me tell you something, they're very deep. If you pull one of those out, try doing it sometime when you're out in the field. You pull it out, and you've got this long stem like that goes way down there. Well, way down there, this thing is branching out all directions and coming up everywhere, which is fine in the field, but it's also going to happen in your backyard. So, I'll let you in on a little secret. There's one milkweed, native milkweed here, that they really like, that's quite attractive. Actually, they prefer to lay eggs on that. They also prefer to feed on the flowers of that because it blooms over a longer period. It's called the swamp milkweed. Asclepias incarnata. It's the swamp milkweed. It has smooth, narrow leaves and looks kind of willowy compared to a common milkweed you see along the roadside. It also stays in better condition later in the year. Your field milkweed often gets very tatty looking toward the end of the year, and the butterflies simply won't lay eggs on it. If you had the field milkweed, say you're on a farm, you've got fields full of, or roadsides that have lots of milkweed in them. About early in the summer, go by and hack a bunch of those stems right off. Why? Because they'll come back up with fresh leaves, and you'll still have good quality leaves later in the season. Whereas otherwise, they all get rather weathered by the end of the season. Oh, I'd say probably about June 15th or so, or by the end of June, certainly. And then you'll get a second crop of milkweed stalks coming up. You don't need to hack them all off. I mean, a mowed farmer's field is great. If they've got lots of, they got pasture, they have milkweeds growing in it, and they come through and mow it, if they often do, coming back into that place is wonderful, because the milkweeds come up and they're actually blooming in August when normally they bloom a lot earlier. So you can get better quality milkweed to feed you.
Is swamp milkweed the orange one?
It comes in lavender and white.
What species did you say was that?
Incarnata. There's one called soulmate, but I don't think it's that much different from, it's a cultivated variety, but I don't really think it's that much different from the wild.
Is one they call butterfly weed? Is it?
Butterfly, yeah, butterfly weed is Asclepias tuberosa that has orange flowers and is fairly short. Now they'll eat that fine. They don't prefer it. It doesn't have quite as much chemicals on their leaves to attract them as the swamp. They really like the swamp. And the swamp milkweed gets about this high, about 3, 4 feet tall. Whereas the other one's quite short, maybe 2 feet at most.
They're like 8 foot tall.
What, your orange one? Yeah. Well, you're growing them well then, because they usually don't get
Oh
big.
my gosh, they're so tall.
Yeah.
I have to, well, bend them over and then chop them off and then little ones come up and it's invasive.
So, as far as another thing you can grow in your backyard that's really good if you have the space for it is a what we consider a weed tree here. Okay, this is the wild black cherry. It's Prunus serratna is the scientific name for it. I'm a botanist, you can tell. I have a PhD in botany, so I'm going to use the Latin names. It's found all over Iowa. Almost any forest or woodland is going to have some Prunus serratna in it. It tends to get black knot disease, so you can almost find the trees by these sooty black incrustations on the bark. These trees are very attractive to a number of different butterflies that you really love to have in your backyard. One is the red-spotted purple, which is at very low numbers right now. The tiger swallowtail is another. These butterflies love to lay eggs on those trees. And if you should get a Cecropia caterpillar, it's ideal food for that. And you get some eggs from here, you've then got your food plants. See? The only thing to remember about this wild black cherry is what it's officially called, is that you don't want it to bloom. You don't want it to bloom, and you don't want it to set seed, because seeds will come up all over your yard. So how do you stop this from happening? Well, first of all, if you want to use this to sleeve out butterflies, we'll talk about that a little bit later. You want to have the plant in a vegetative state as much of the summer as you can. And you don't want it to bloom, and you don't want it to set seed, because the seeds it's a weedy tree, so it'll come up everywhere in your yard. So what you do is, in the fall, you whack off those branches right near the base. So you've got a stumped out tree. Pollarded is what the official term would be for it. So every fall, you whack off all those branches, and then it shoots out 3 or 4 feet to recover itself every year. That's what you want, because you've whacked it off, all those branches, you've taken off all the flower buds. You've taken off all the possibility for it to produce seed. So no longer is it going to be a weed tree in your yard, and you get this higher quality food, which will be more attractive to the butterflies to lay eggs on. Otherwise, it wouldn't be attractive at all. So keep that in mind. When you have a tree and you want to use for food for your caterpillars, or you want butterflies to lay eggs on it, you want to have the leaves vegetated. You want them to be in good quality late into the season. So my yard looks like somebody's gone through and just whacked everything off this time of year. And you want to do it in the fall, because this black knot disease that I told you about, that you can identify the trees with, that particular disease spreads in the spring, and you don't want to spread that to your trees. It comes in through a broken place in the bark or any kind of damage. So you want to do your damage in the fall so that the trees dry out and heal before the spores are released in the spring. So as far as what you can do for your gardens and yard, those are the most important things that you can do. And they don't cost you a lot of money, and they don't take a lot of space. Now, one thing I always stress when I talk about growing butterflies and moths from immatures is that you want to start with an egg. Now, why is that? Well, unfortunately, most people think that the biggest enemy of a caterpillar is a bird. No, it's not. Insects are their own worst enemies. Caterpillars, the majority of caterpillars in the wild, if they survive, are going to be parasitized. Now, these aren't parasites like a mosquito. You live after a mosquito bite. You might get a disease from having a mosquito bite, but the mosquito itself didn't kill you, okay? It's just a parasite. Now, in these insects, these little parasitic wasps, they're not really parasites. They live like a parasite inside the body of the caterpillar, but they're not parasites. They're predators. The caterpillar always dies. And they're very tiny. So, not only do these parasites live inside the caterpillars, but how many of you ever seen a butterfly egg? Okay, how small are they? Pretty tiny. Do you know there are little wasps that lay eggs in those eggs? In the egg. I'm not talking about the caterpillar. The egg. Do you know that 5 or 10 wasps can come out of one egg? Yeah. And in the wild, a lot of the eggs get parasitized. But if the egg hatches, you've got a caterpillar that's free of all parasites. So then if you raise it, you won't have to worry about that. Because the majority of parasites don't kill the caterpillar right away. No, they're much more, it's much more hideous than that. They lay an egg inside the caterpillar, and that egg sits there inside, may divide a few times, and feed off rather unnecessary parts of the body that aren't critical to life. And it waits for the formation of hormones that may take it into the pupal stage. In other words, when it's full grown. And then they grow like mad and destroy the caterpillar. So here you are, you've gotten this wonderful caterpillar out in your yard, and you put it in, you've taken care of it, and then it's almost ready to pupate. You put all your work into it. It's through eating, you've fed it all this food and everything, and then all of a sudden these hideous things come out. Little cocoons all over it, or it just, a maggot falls out of it, or whatever, it dies. It's sad to watch, it's terrible. It's terrible to have a child see this. They put all this effort and it has such hope in it. So if you can, get an egg. If the egg hatches, you got a clean caterpillar. And so that's why I offer eggs through the Nature Center here. They're clean. They don't have anything, there's no parasites. You're going to get caterpillars that are free of parasites. And it's important to keep them that way. So if you're going to raise them outdoors where these parasites are present, you better have the kind of fabric to protect them. So let's talk about that for a moment. This is there's various cages you can get. This is example one. You can get online. These are self-erecting cages if you want to raise caterpillars in it. And by self-erecting, I mean just that. Okay?
It's a resort.
These are nice. These are nice. I didn't have these 10, 15 years ago. I had to put up with what you don't want for cages. This works perfectly in the house. Okay, you put a couple of stalks and milkweed in here, and you can raise your caterpillars very easily, and they can't get away from you. It's easy to clean. If you want to sterilize it, you just twist it, drop it in some bleach for 2 minutes and it's all clean. All right?
Who makes that?
You can get these online. Used to say BioQuip used to have them, but they've gone out of business. Now, you can get smaller ones here, and I'm going to pass this one around. Again, these are spring-loaded. The frame is all inside. It's all hidden. Doesn't interfere with butterfly wings. And another important thing about all these cages is they don't have sharp corners. They don't have sharp corners for the wings to get battered in. They're rounded, see? So you can, I'll pass this around. It's easy to, and if you want to, if you're a teacher and you want to pass around exhibits of live butterflies and stuff, this is perfect. I prefer the black netting. If you can get black netting, because it's actually easier to see in than white. You'd think they'd be the other way around, but it's not. White reflects against your eyes and interferes with your ability to see inside. Black absorbs, and so you see what's behind. The light's coming from inside the cage. But I use these for everything, one way or another, unless I use sleeves. But they're perfect for easy to get in and out of these things, easy to clean them, easy to fold them up, easy to store them, and they're available online. Another thing you want to avoid with these cages is they sell them sometimes with a vinyl side, supposedly a window to let you see. Well, I'll tell you something. That window is not much good. You can't hardly see anything through it. It's very poor optical quality. And secondly, the butterflies have trouble crawling up it. So get ones that are all netted, okay? Where's our bug pile? Is it somewhere in here? Oh, good. Keep that with me here so I don't forget to take it home. Yeah.
Using bleach on that, wouldn't that make that white?
It would if you left it in.
Oh, but just putting it.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
Then rinse it right away. And if it does bleach it a little, it doesn't matter. It's just a cage. Yeah.
So 100% bleach?
No, 5%. 5%.
All moths infected. Like if I had a blue moth.
No. Those big wasps you have around your house, they're feeding on spiders, or they've got nests up in the corners of your house, and those kind of. They aren't internal parasites. These internal parasites of caterpillars are very tiny, as a general rule. You won't hardly notice they're there, but you notice the fabric on this. It keeps those parasitoids out. We call them parasitoids because they aren't parasites. They're predators. They're parasite-like predators. That's why we call them parasitoids. But they're deadly. Always deadly. So you want to start with eggs if you can. And we'll talk about monarchs at the very end of my talk. We'll talk about monarchs. They have special problems that a lot of people aren't aware of, where the egg itself might have something very hazardous for the future of that caterpillar. And we'll talk about what to do about that. But most butterflies, if the egg hatches, you've got a nice, clean caterpillar to work with. It's worth putting your time in to get to pupal stage. If you find one in your yard, just remember, it's possible. It's not necessarily going to be true, but be prepared if you get something other than a butterfly or moth out of it. The moths generally, because they fly at night, great majority of moths fly at night. And for that reason, even though they'd be coming to your butterfly garden, you're not going to see them much, because first of all, it's dark, we can't see well at night. And secondly, you're usually sleeping at that time. So most people are going to want butterflies because they can see them during the day, and they want generally the most beautiful ones, which are the bigger ones, and ones like black swallowtail, tiger swallowtail. We have giant swallowtails around here, very few. I only saw 2 this year. But we do have them, and they come into this particular vicinity quite regularly every year. But if you can get hold of a hop tree, and this is only going to work if you are near a wooded area. If you can get hold of a hop tree. It's a native Iowa tree, but it's very rare in this state. A hop tree will attract the giant swallowtail. The giant swallowtail will feed on anything in the rue family. So if you have rue in your herb garden, that might be attractive to it too. But generally, I prefer to have hop tree, which is easy to work with. It looks like poison ivy a little bit, but if you notice the leaf difference, it doesn't have a stalk in the middle leaf, so it's perfectly safe for you to touch. But a hop tree will be very attractive to these giant swallowtails if you're in their right habitat, which means a wooded area, or opening in a wood area, or edge of a wooded area. In Iowa, and we do have them here, and they will seek those out. They are able to sense those. These butterflies are amazing. There's only a few in Marleaf Cedar Falls, and I planted practically all of them, so I know where they are. To see these butterflies come near your yard, they know it's there somewhere, and they start landing on different plants, trying to find out which one it is. They can smell it, but they can't exactly identify it right away. And how do the butterflies taste? With their feet. Their taste sensors are on their feet. So to be sure, every butterfly will land on the food plant to make sure it's the food plant before they lay an egg. And if they have any problems with their legs, if females have any problems with their legs, they generally won't be laying eggs at all. So, but these butterflies are amazing if you can get a few of them. And you'd be lucky to get 1 or 2 eggs on it, but it's wonderful. It's our biggest butterfly in North America.
Did you say a hop?
Hop tree.
Like
hop tree. Hop, as in
like what beer is made
hopping.
from?
Yes, exactly. It's called that because the fruit clusters look a little like hop, clusters of hop. You know how that looks, but they're actually wafer-like seeds that look more like a huge elm seed. And they are native here, just very uncommon in Iowa. And because they're uncommon, you'll likely get a butterfly because they seek these out.
Are they an intrusive plant?
No, it's just a small tree.
It's a tree, do you have to
Small
trim
tree,
it back?
maybe 15 feet, 20 feet at most.
You don't have to trim it back or anything?
You can, I do. I
Okay.
whack them back, just any tree that I grow for caterpillars,
Take the buds off.
I whack them back in the fall so that they grow more vigorously the next year. You want to have young leaves going later into the season than they otherwise would, because most of these butterflies are more common later in the season, and they will seek out your tree if it's got these young leaves on it, because all the wild trees have old leaves on them, leaves that have been out all since spring.
So you whack them in the fall also?
Yeah. Any tree you grow as a food plant for your caterpillars, or that you have primarily to attract butterflies, you want to cut it back hard.
September, October?
I wait till the leaves are off. As soon as the leaves are off, cut them. And then all winter they can dry up and heal over so that they're not infected with anything in the spring. Raising caterpillars is a lot of fun. I've done it for now over 50 years. And there's 2 ways to do it. A lot of people, one thing I really shun about growing caterpillars, I hate to see this, is they take a jar and they put it in and they put the lid on. Now, you can do that with monarchs, okay? They can sometimes put on a lot. Monarchs are pretty tough caterpillars. So if you've had luck with monarchs and think you can treat all butterfly caterpillars like that, you're wrong, okay? There are a lot of them that get sick really quickly when you do that. So my advice to you is, if you're going to raise caterpillars, keep air around them all the time. The best thing to do is have some kind of an old juice bottle or something. I like to use the, what do they call it? The orange,
Sunny D.
yeah, any of those orange drinks where they got that kind of a bottle, which has got a fairly large base on it and quite a bit of water in the neck part. because the plants you stick in there are going to pull water down, and if you have a very narrow vase, it's going to dry out quick. But put them in the vase, put the food plant in this vase, and a little hint, always split the stem lengthwise at the base, 2 directions. So you got 4 strips of stem at the base. That helps water come up, because especially with trees, they're going to wilt very easily. And that's one reason why we use the black swallowtail in the nature center. If we use the tiger swallowtail, what would be our problem? It feeds on trees. And you put trees in a place, in an exhibit like that, or at home, in your home, tree branches dry out. Even if you split the stems and everything, they're gonna wilt very quickly. Especially if you want to grow like morning glory. Willows and elm branches will dry very quickly, no matter how you try to prepare the stem to pick up water. And you can't just put plastic over it, that's going to kill the caterpillars. One of the best ways to a caterpillar always is to use a sleeve. But a sleeve is only useful, I'm going to pass this around. This is called a sleeve, okay? Very simple. I use organza fabric. Why? Because the fabric has very tight weave, yet is thin and will let air through. That's important, otherwise you're going to cook your caterpillars. You don't want to use a heavy black anything. You'll kill the leaves too. You'll kill the leaves of the branch as well as the caterpillars by using a heavier fabric. You need lots of airflow, but yet you don't want those parasitoids to come in, because the intent of this is to use this outdoors. Now, if you use this outdoors, and say you have a milkweed and you want to pull it over a milkweed and tie it at the base, what kind of a problem are you going to have?
Milkweed's gonna be a lot taller. It's gonna grow.
Well, that would be a good thing if it was tall, but often they aren't that tall.
Mine are.
Well, they aren't right away.
Right.
They start from 0, right? So, using this on the ground can be a real problem because of mice. Yeah, don't forget the mice, okay? Don't forget the mice. They love to chew through these things. And birds like to get into them too. And you can see where there have been lots of holes, and I've taped them all up. And these are easy to fix. You put tape on, regular Scotch tape, plastic office tape, and you tape it on both sides of the hole, and it seals it right up. So you can see this one's been through a lot of damage. You can look at that. I'm going to pass this around. Very easy to make by yourself, but caterpillars raised in a sleeve like this will be far more healthier than caterpillars that are raised on cut food. And for some types of caterpillars, like the Cecropia moth, the Promethea moth, the Cecropia, this is the biggest insect in North America, okay? The females are huge. You imagine how big the caterpillar is. And you know when the caterpillar starts spinning its cocoon, more than 1/3 of that caterpillar is just silk for its cocoon. So you can imagine how big that caterpillar is, all right? But the caterpillars of these moths, some of these moths, are very, very susceptible to disease if they're raised on cut food indoors. So the way to raise nice, healthy caterpillars on trees and shrubs where you can get this up high enough away from mice is to use a sleeve. It's a lot easier for you, it's a lot better for them, and as long as you're watching, if this is in your yard, and you've got some wild black cherry back there, you can use a sleeve and you'll be there. You can see if the birds are starting to bother it, or the squirrels are getting up there chewing in it, or whatever. I can't do that. My sleeves are all out in wild places where I'm not around. And so I come back and I often find somebody has been after my bugs. And nothing I can do about it. But I'll pass this around. You can take a look at this. Always good to have it. And they get much better. I use much bigger sleeves than that. That's just a little one to pass around. But you can make them as big as you want, and you can get it's called organza fabric, and I prefer black because it doesn't show up. I've got to hide these in forests and places around here because I don't want people to see them because people can bother your sleeves and they're out in the middle of nowhere. I use a lot of these sleeves, and you get very healthy caterpillars that way. Now, caterpillars, how long did it live? I mean, how long does it take for a butterfly caterpillar to mature? First of all, how long does it take an egg to hatch?
2 to 3 days.
2, 3, 4, 5 days, max 5 days. For a few, like morning globe, it takes like 8 days, but it's pretty fast. Now, I ship these eggs to all the nature centers, so you know I have to get on it pretty quick, right after they're laid. So, eggs hatch quite quickly. So you're very soon after you find eggs, you're going to have caterpillars. Now, those caterpillars, how long will it take them to become pupae?
12 days.
No, for butterflies, around 20 days. About 20 days. 15, 20 days. It depends on the butterfly. Generally, about 15, 20 days you can expect to have a pupa. Now, if you're raising these indoors, you want to think about something else. Remember that I said that all these butterflies and moths go into diapause. That is, they stop developing and get ready for winter. Now, if the day length is too short, say you don't have the narrow window where they can see natural light, you have them indoors, and they get a longer day than outdoors, they may not go into diapause. You may get butterflies coming out in October. Now that's pretty sad. That really is. Here you are, you killed them. There's nothing they can do. You can't let them go. You can let them go, but there's no future for them. So you want to watch the day length when you're either in the spring or in the summer, or in the fall, because when the day lengths shorten, they get ready to go into hibernation. And that means the black swallowtail overwinters as a pupa. So the caterpillars, if they're exposed to decreasing day length, at a certain point, those caterpillars will produce a pupa that's going into diapause. And those pupae will be brown. Now, earlier in the year, in the summertime, the day length is long. And the swallowtail butterflies will produce pupae, their caterpillars will produce pupae that are green. And will hatch out in about 10, 15 days. But in the fall, they're brown, will go into diapause, and will not hatch out until they've been through a winter, a long, cold period. Now, what do you do with them then? Okay, so you've got some caterpillars that have produced pupae and cocoons, and they haven't hatched out. They're not dead. They're in diapause. What do you do with them? The best thing to do with them is to put them in a wire cage, steel mesh cage in your garage if it's not heated, or an outdoor building, or any place where it's not heated, and where they get natural light. That combination will make them, they'll hibernate fine there, and they'll emerge at the right time to be with the wild ones out in the wild. So when you release them, they'll find mates, and you'll be doing some good, okay? You don't want them hatching out way early. So do that. It's the easiest way to get them through the winter. Now, you can overwinter them also in your refrigerator. And if you have earth pupators, like sphinx moths and so on, they pupate in the ground. But instead of having them pupate in dirt, putting dirt in the container and putting the caterpillar in there and have it dig and produce a cell for itself and then pupate in that chamber, you're going to likely damage it, or it could get infected with fungi and stuff in the soil. So the best thing to do with the earth pupator, if it's gonna pupate, is to put it in a bucket, like a 5-gallon bucket, filled with moist paper towels. It'll think it's dirt. It'll dig around in there. Don't put too many caterpillars in, maybe 5 to a 5-gallon bucket, and have these moist paper towels in the bottom. They can't climb up the walls because at that point their legs aren't functional anymore. They can hump around, but they can't climb. So they'll pupate in there, and then you take the pupae out, and they'll be nice and clean. You'll know where they are. You won't damage them getting them out of dirt, and they won't get infected with anything that would be in dirt. And then, what do you do with them? Put them in the refrigerator. In the fall, leave them out at normal, at room temperature if you want. And in the fall, late September, early October, put them in a tight plastic Tupperware container. No air exchange. Put in a paper towel, just one paper towel. Put 3 drops of water in. That's it. Put the lid on, put it in the refrigerator, and forget about it until April. They'll be in great shape. Why do that? Because refrigerators tend to dry out things. And when you bring it out in the spring, what do? Put it in your nice warm house. Be careful about putting insects, pupae that have overwintered, out in your open air of your house. It's dry. It'll dry them out, and you'll end up with butterflies and moths with crumpled wings because they didn't have enough moisture left in their bodies to pump up their wings completely. So be careful about that. Remember, your house is very severe climate for insects and things that can lose moisture. Any questions on this? Then you have any problems? Yeah.
My question is, what's the difference between a male monarch compared to female? You said it,
The male monarch has a scent gland on its back wing. So it has four wings, right? Butterflies have 4 wings. The hind 2 wings on a male monarch, right in the middle of it, has a black spot. That tells you it's a male. The female doesn't have any spot at all. And he flutters around over the female. I guess it's some kind of aphrodisiac or something, but it seems to work. But that's what that whole family of butterflies has. And the monarch, think about the monarch for a minute. It's talked about a lot, but a lot of people miss the point here. Don't forget it's a tropical butterfly. It's the only tropical butterfly that regularly comes to Iowa. It's in a family called the Danaidae, which also includes queen butterflies. All of its relatives are in the tropics and stay in the tropics. I'm going to talk about a disease now because I'm going to talk about monarchs and how to raise them. I want to talk about a particular disease. It's very important for the monarch because it explains a lot about the success of the monarch. The monarch has a protozoan disease. And this is something, if you're going to raise monarchs in any kind of quantity, you need to know about. It's called OE. You can't hardly pronounce this Latin name. I'm not going to do it. It's not worth it. Just remember, it's OE disease. This particular disease affects the pupal stage of the monarch. All the damage is done in the pupal stage. It results in either the death of the pupa, if it's a severe infection, and the pupa goes black. Be careful about monarchs that have turned black, the pupil. It should not turn black. If it looks like it's black and you can see the coloration of the wings, where the wings are going to be, it's not a problem. If you can see the orange color anywhere, that is not a problem. If it's overall black, it's got probably OE. This particular protozoan is deadly to the monarch and to all of its relatives. Monarchs in our area have I'd say about 8% of the butterflies have this. Rather low percentage. But that's in the spring. Toward the end of the season, it gets worse. Now, why is that? Let's understand a little bit about this protozoan, because if you're going to raise butterflies, you should know something about this. It destroys or does all of its damage in the pupal stage, I said. Now, if it doesn't kill that pupa, and it usually doesn't in a light infestation, the pupa will hatch out into a butterfly. The butterfly may or may not have deformities. Depends on how severe the infection is. If it's very severe, the butterfly will have crippled wings, can't fly, or it'll be too weak, won't be able to fly very far, soon die. If it's a lesser infection, you won't hardly notice it. If it's a very light infection, you won't notice it. And those are the butterflies that are most dangerous. Why? Because the spores of this protozoan are produced on the abdomen of the adult. Okay, that's the only place they're produced. So if you have butterflies that can fly, they're going to spread around these spores. Now, how do they get? These spores can only hatch inside of a monarch caterpillar. Only. No other butterflies are affected. So remember that. That's rule number 1. Second rule to remember is that an infected butterfly, infected adult butterfly, cannot infect another adult butterfly. Cannot. There is no development of this parasite in the adult. It's all in the pupa and larva where it develops. So when you have adults together, one might be infected and another not. Will one get the other infected? No, they won't. So adults are safe to keep together, aren't they? Now larvae, the raising larvae, some of them have this OE infection. Can the larvae spread it to other larvae? No, they cannot. Why? Because none of them have spores. The spores are only on the adults, right? Only on the adults. Keep this in mind. Larvae are safe to have around larvae, whether they're infected or not. Doesn't matter. Adults are safe to have around other adults. An infected adult cannot affect a clean adult. Now, where does the danger come? Having adults around eggs. Having adults around larvae. Deadly. Okay? All it takes is one butterfly with these spores on it. And you can't necessarily tell whether a butterfly has that unless you've got a microscope. Okay? You do not want to have those spores get on the eggs or the milkweed. So, how do you prevent this? Well, either you have a microscope and you look at the butterfly microscopically, you stick Scotch tape, literally, to the sides of the butterfly's abdomen, and you look at it in a microscope. If you see these black spores, you've got an infected adult. And I do not breed from infected adults. So all the eggs I produce every year, and I produce about 10,000 eggs every year, and ship them all over the place, and so all the nature centers get their eggs from me. They are OE free. Any eggs you pick up here at the nature center are OE free. And when I put a lot of eggs in some of these containers. Sometimes I'll put 50 or 100 eggs in there. They're free of this OE parasite. You go out and you pick them off the milkweed plants, you may get some of these diseased eggs. Now, why did I say diseased eggs? I told you if an egg hatched, it was clean, right? It's not that simple with monarchs. Monarchs are kind of an exception. Why is that? These spores are produced on the adult, on her abdomen. As she lays the egg, the spores end up on, some of them may end up either near that egg on the leaf or on the egg itself. And guess what the first meal of a caterpillar is? It's eggshell. Immediately infected. And you're going to put all your time in racing this all the way to the pupal stage to find out you've got a horribly disfigured butterfly. You don't want that. You don't want to give a child something like that and have them raise it and come out with some crippled and then have to explain why that happened. Yeah, you don't want to do that. So start with clean eggs if you can. Now, if you start with clean eggs from the Nature Center, will all of your caterpillars be free of this disease? What do you think? All of them? Why not?
No.
You know they started out clean, didn't you? They were free of the disease where they were here. But what are you feeding them? Milkweed. Guess what? Who's flying around that milkweed out there? Monarchs. And they're scattering their spores as they fly around. And the spores end up on the top surface of the leaves. And so you're going to get a few OE infections no matter what you do, unless you go to all the work of dipping all your leaves and plant stems in 5% bleach. And some people actually do that. I don't recommend that. It's a lot of work. It ends up making the leaves not last as long. And so the best thing to do is to raise them this way. Make sure you have clean eggs to start with. Try and get them from somebody who's made sure that the eggs themselves are clean. That's the important thing to start with. And then expect to have a few of these cases because you're feeding them wild milkweed leaves. And as we get later and later into the season, you're going to have more and more problems because it builds up over time as the season progresses. There are more monarchs. They're flying around these milkweeds more. The males are cruising around. And a lot of people think all the females are the only ones giving this to the next generation. No, they are not. The males are. They're dropping the eggs on the spores of this protozoan on top of the leaves, and then the larvae eat it, and then they get infected. So you can't help a little of that. But remember, we have a low incidence of it here. But expect to see some of it. Recognize what it is. Know that it wasn't your fault. Know that this would have happened in the wild as well as for you. Realize that in the wild, 96% or more of these butterflies would never have made it to begin with. Remember, monarch butterflies on average lay 300 or 400 eggs. What does that tell you about an insect? It tells you that only on the average about 2 or 3 or maybe 4 of those are going to survive to be adults. It's not good out there. It isn't like people. People, you got a good chance of making it through to adulthood here, especially now. But for butterflies, any kind of insect, it's not good. So don't worry about those few that are not good. If they're diseased or something, throw them in the freezer. Put them in the freezer. Save the next generation. Remember, a lot of what you're going to release is going to be good. Now, how to protect your equipment. If your equipment gets contaminated with this disease, you've got to use bleach to disinfect it. But wait a minute here. What did I say earlier? Larvae cannot infect larvae. Adults cannot infect adults. Simple solution, folks. You don't need to bleach anything. You don't need to do anything else. All you need to do is keep your larvae in one room, and eggs and larvae, and your emerging pupae and adults in another, or hopefully in a different building. Because then they never get near each other, okay? That's all you need to do. Very simple solution. And you can raise batch after batch after batch after batch. But never take the cage that you're using for the adults and raise larvae in. Don't do that. So just keep them separate and make sure you wash your hands from going from the adults to the larvae. It's a serious disease. And if you raise caterpillars sequentially, one generation after another, I produce more than 1,000 monarch butterflies every year. So I know all about this. Plus I produce all these eggs for going around all these nature centers, and I sell them online and everything. They're all OE free, and I keep them that way. And we have nice, healthy butterflies. And you'll read online that you gotta buy these $400 or $600 cages and put them on plots of milkweed out in the field, and get 4 or 5 monarchs and throw them in there, and they'll mate and lay eggs. Oh, you don't want to do that. If one of those monarchs is infected, it's going to spread spores all over the milkweeds in that little enclosure, and you're going to have a mess. It's going to be awful. It's going to be terrible to spectacle to see. Plus, you've paid all that money for nothing then. So they'll tell you, don't raise uncut food. You have to buy our expensive cages to put them in. No, don't do that. Cut food works fine. We raise all of ours on cut food. The secret is to replace it every 2 days. You know? caterpillars work quite well together. They don't seem to get disease. If you get a disease where the caterpillar climbs up high onto a surface, any kind of surface, a leaf, it generally wants to go high. And then it hangs from one of its middle legs and wilts. That is called nuclear polyhedrosis virus. And that is nasty, terrible virus to have. What you need to do is try to get that caterpillar out of there with a paper towel, get it pulled off so it doesn't break open. Because if it breaks open, then virus particles, there's probably more than 1 billion virus particles inside that thing. So you don't want to get that spread around. Watch for that. Be aware of caterpillars that are not healthy. Get them out of there. If they aren't feeding, you need to be careful. Now, what time in a larva's life period, while it's a larva, what times in its period is something where you don't want to move it? Anybody know? When will it stay absolutely motionless, not feed, and look like it's dead?
Oh, when it's loosening its
When it's
skin
gonna-
and.
They have to shed their exoskeleton. Their skeletons are on the outside of their body, not inside. Our skeletons grow with us as we grow. Theirs do not. Theirs are like, it's like living inside a tin can for them. They can only grow so far, and then they've got to get rid of that covering. So they molt it off, and they do this 4 times. Most of them do it 4 times. So while they're waiting for that, and it's quite a transformation, they've got to develop a new exoskeleton inside, underneath. And then they have to split the old skeleton, pull themselves forward out of it, and then pump themselves up into this new one, which is much bigger. And then that has to harden. So there's 2 ways you can tell they're doing this. One, they're going to generally crawl to a place that's not where the feeding isn't happening. They might hide under a leaf, they might be on the stem, they might be on the side of the cage. But you'll notice that they've spun a little silk mat. In a lot of cases, you'll be able to see that silk mat. And they made that silk mat so they won't fall off. Because if they fall off, it might not catch their exoskeleton so that they can pull forward out of it. So if you then take them off that mat and think that you can move that caterpillar, then it's off its silk mat, and it may have trouble getting out of that old exoskeleton, that old covering over its body. So you want to watch for that. Another clue that they're going to do this is they have a face shield, a sort of a covering over their face. That part of their face slides down over their mouth. Why does it do this? Well, because that way their mandibles get an early start to harden. Because they develop new mandibles. The mandibles are enlarged. So that they need this face mask down so that they can get bigger. And so then they can be ready to eat soon after they molt. So that's why that happens. And if you see that face mask pulled down, you know it's preparing to molt.
They do it 4 times.
4 times. Most of them do it 4 times.
Are the red or yellow and black, orange and black, milkweed bugs harmful?
The question was whether the orange and black milkweed bugs, so-called Hartman bugs, are injurious to monarchs. No, they're not. They feed on, they accompany the milkweed plants. You'll see them on milkweed plants everywhere. They don't really hurt the plant at all. They don't harm the caterpillars. They feed on the sap of the plant. They have a proboscis that they stick into the plant. But they don't harm it. You'll also see these red beetles, which are milkweed beetles. And they'll be on the milkweeds too. And they don't do any harm either. What does do harm are the aphids. Aphids can be a real problem on milkweed, and they're orange. Why are they orange? Because milkweeds are toxic, and they're advertising the toxicity they have because they're feeding on milkweed. So the aphids that you find on milkweeds feed only on milkweeds, and they're orange, and they're that way for a reason. I'm toxic, don't you dare eat me. Just like the monarchs that way.
So I don't need to remove the butterfly, no, or The red one, I don't need to remove.
You don't need to remove any of these. I remove them because they're chewing on the leaves.
Right,
The beetles are.
yeah,
So I take them out.
okay.
Yeah. But they won't cause any harm to caterpillars. Yeah.
What do you do to get rid of the aphids then? You wash it off?
Yeah. Good sharp spray will take those right off. They multiply quickly, but you know, if you're going to be feeding your caterpillars, you're only talking 2 or 3 days. You got to replace them with food anyway. So try to look for milkweeds that aren't heavily infested with it, because the leaf quality will go down if there's a lot of larvae, a lot of aphids on there.
A place called Nature's Good Guys that sells tax ladybirds.
Yeah. Some of the ladybirds, they tend to fly away, you know. And they don't eat fast enough. Aphids are fast reproducers. And I'm not sure that they would eat the milkweed aphids. They're toxic, remember. Yeah.
The little skippers that we see, do you have in your yard grasses and things for those?
Yeah, a lot of the small skippers, butterflies have 3 big groups in them. Butterflies and the Lepidoptera have 3 big groups in them: the moths, the butterflies, and the skippers. The skippers are kind of they're considered butterflies, but they're a separate group. Most of our skippers are quite small, and as larvae they feed on grasses, you're right. Do they feed on the grasses we have in our yards? Probably not, I don't know. They aren't generally highly ornamental. I mean, they aren't really pretty. Most people don't want to raise them because they have long life cycles. As caterpillars, they live a long time. So a lot of people don't have the patience. I mean, for some people do if it's really big thing like Cecropia, you know, our biggest insect in North America. People are willing to wait the 6 weeks for the caterpillar to mature, but not for the little ones. We have a skipper that's easy to raise, though, that's quite large, and that's called the silver-spotted skipper. And it feeds on almost anything in the legume family. If you have some Baptisia or false indigo, it'll feed on that. It'll feed on wisteria. It'll feed on locust. So, and you'll find it's a very common butterfly, but most people don't want to raise it because, again, it's not that showy. I'm assuming that most people here, if they want to raise a butterfly, would probably want to raise something like monarch, like swallowtail, so on, that kind of thing. I generally always have these black swallowtails available all the time. And why are these ideal for schools? I should mention that too. They're ideal for schools because they feed on a herbaceous plant that doesn't wilt very easily. Okay? You can take almost anything in that family, parsley, you can take parsley, you can take parsnip, wild parsnip, you can take carrot, any of those plants, you can take the leaves and you can easily get them in a vase and they won't wilt. They're very easy to handle. And because they are herbaceous like that, they last quite a while in the where you got them indoors. Where you get into trouble is when you try and raise something like a tiger swallowtail. Put that in the nature center here, and the leaves, they feed on trees. Things that feed on trees are a problem in the classroom. They're a problem in the nature center. They're a problem anywhere where you want to raise them indoors. They do better in a sleeve. That's why it's important. If you really want to get interested in butterflies, you want to have sleeves for those that feed on trees. And then raise the ones that feed on herbs, like monarchs, like black swallowtails. Have them feed inside. You can easily feed them cut food. Yeah.
Going back to the plants, like we raised, started growing cosmos, and those things, they grow fast, they got a lot of flowers on them, and the flowers last a long time on them. Do you think that would be a good plant for the...
Cosmos is a good attractor for butterflies, but an even better one is zinnias, and even easier, well, about as easy to grow. If you're going to grow zinnias, though, zinnias have kind of a big platform flower if you grow the right kind. There are a lot of zinnias that are squatty, short plants. They don't have much nectar. They've been bred for one thing, and that's being short and squat, okay? Forget those. You want the big tall zinnias, and the ones I recommend would be the Veneris Giant series. They're nice big flowers. If you have a vegetable garden, make a whole row of them, and you'll have beautiful flowers to take indoors as bouquets as well, and the butterflies love those. They're so easy and fast to grow. And they're annuals. Got mine every year, but they're very nice to have in the garden.
Giant what?
Veneris Giant. You can get individual colors, or you can get a mix, and they're bred to be a little better quality flowers, more double, and they're just as attractive to the butterflies there's more care went into the breeding of those, but they're more attractive. And most people, I figured, if you're going to have this in your yard, why not have it more attractive to you as well as butterflies? So, coneflowers. Some people like coneflowers. I don't have any. I don't think they're that attractive. I'd rather have a zinnia or something like that. It's not native. Okay, fine. Doesn't bother me. Most of Iowa is not native. It's corn and soybeans don't grow it. So I don't concern myself with trying to make a native yard. Trying to do that is a lot of money, a lot of work, and not necessarily going to improve your chances of getting butterflies.
What are the Luna moths attracted to?
Okay, Luna moths. We're talking about giant silk moths. Here's the Luna moth. Here's the Cecropia moth. Here's the Promethea moth. All are native here. They aren't attracted to anything. Why? They have no working mouth parts. They cannot feed, they cannot take any water in. When that caterpillar starts spinning its big cocoon, say it's a Cecropia moth, we're talking about the biggest insect in North America, okay? We're talking big, and heavy, okay? This moth comes out of its cocoon, and it cannot eat, it cannot drink. It literally starves to death and lives about 5 days, okay? All that beauty for 5 days, that's it. When that caterpillar spins its cocoon, it has all the food and water for not only the transformation, metamorphosis from the larva to the pupa, and from the pupa to the adult, and all the food and water to propel the adult through its entire life. And all the silk to make the cocoon. So you're talking about a big caterpillar. You're talking about an awful lot of stored food in that caterpillar. And it's all going to be used. And when it's done, it's done. The moth just dies. That's it. It's sad. Now, why won't you see one of these moths? You want to see a Luna moth? Anybody here seen one? Just a few. Why? Well, they fly at night. All these big moths fly at night, okay? So chances are you're sleeping. The Cecropia moth mates between 3 and 5 in the morning. How many of you are up then? Okay? And how much light do you have to look at these things flying around your yard? You don't. If you saw one of these flying through your yard in the daytime, I guarantee you would see it. All right? But nobody sees them. They don't know they're here. They're here. They fly through your yard probably every year, or every other year. But they have low density. There's only a few of them per square mile. How do they find each other? They can't feed, so they've got to get together pretty quick, don't they? They're only going to live 5 days. Well, how do they do this? Okay, it's very nicely compartmentalized. It's beautifully compartmentalized when you think about it. The female will not fly until she's mated, generally. What does she do? She hangs and lets out a pheromone. She lets this pheromone out into the air, and it forms a cone. The farther it gets away from her, the wider it spreads. It diffuses, right? Now, a male, 2 miles downwind, needs only 1 molecule to know she's there. 1 molecule. He has huge antennae with nothing but receptors for that molecule. If he detects one of those molecules, he turns into the wind. He flies crosswind. He starts flying only at about 3 o'clock in the morning. Why? The female starts putting out her pheromone at that time of the night. Why doesn't she do it all night? It'd wear him out. He died earlier. It protects him for her to have a narrow window when she lets his pheromone out. And he's programmed to not fly until then. So he starts flying at 3 o'clock in the morning, flying crosswind. If he picks up a molecule 2 miles downwind, he turns into the wind. He starts zigzagging, looking for more molecules. The more molecules he picks up, the closer he knows he's to her. Because his cone spreads out, right? As you get closer to her, there's going to be more. So he knows where she is as he gets closer. When he finds her, they mate, and that's it. And they stay mated through the whole next day. Well, you only don't do it once. You better enjoy it. So she'll never mate again. He can mate again. She, the next night, will lay eggs. And she'll lay her eggs until she's dead. She will use up her energy, and then she'll just die. And that's it. So all of his energy that he's got stored into him when he hatches out is to find her. And all of her energy is saved, because she doesn't fly until she's mated, is saved to lay the eggs. It works out beautifully for them. Now, why don't they feed? Okay, here you got the largest insect in North America. Okay, how much food would that take to keep that going? It's going to take more energy for that insect to fly and hover over a flower and get to flowers than it would he'd get out of the flowers. So, it makes no sense. In fact, it'd be bad for him to fly, be able to feed. So they can't feed. And there are a number of hawk moths that do the same thing. They're larger moths too. But some of them, probably most of you, if you have flower gardens, you got petunias, cochineal or lawn tobacco, that kind of thing, you've probably seen hawk moths flying around either in the early morning or toward dusk. These are like jet aircraft, okay? Tiny little wings and a whole lot of power, okay? These are monster bodies. They've got a lot of power. They can really fly fast, and they can maneuver. They can back up. They can go forward. It's like a hummingbird. And they can outmaneuver you very easily because of that. These moths need a lot of food, and they do it because they can move so quickly, and they have a long tongue, and they can feed. So they're big-bodied, but they also have a lot of power. The cecropia moth, these big silk moths, their wings are too big to be able to maneuver that fast around food plants to get nectar out of flowers. They flutter. They can't go fast enough. Yeah.
What kind of moth, or I don't know, whatever, goes into moonflowers?
Same thing. Hawk moths.
You call them a hawk moth.
Sphinx moth. Sphinx moth, hummingbird moth.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all the same thing. They're all the same family, moths. And some of them fly at dusk and dawn. A lot of them fly only at night, so you never see them. They're around here all over. There are all kinds of different ones. They all pupate in the ground. Tomato hornworm is one of these. You grow tomatoes, I've seen one of these. The tomato hornworm only flies at night, so you're not going to see it feeding, or you're not going to see the moth. You see the caterpillar.
I see the caterpillar.
Yeah.
Promethea, what's its host plant? I've never seen one in Iowa.
Oh, they're here. But you know what? Blackhawk County it occurs all the way to the East Coast. And it stops right here at Blackhawk County. Anywhere farther west, they aren't there. So we're on the very, very edge of its range. And yeah, they're right here in this area.
Which one is that? Like a little
Promethea moth. Promethea moth, this one. This is a female. Now, this is an interesting one because the female is brown and marked like this. The male is all black. And the male has eyes that only work in the daytime. Her eyes work at night. She flies at night, and he flies in the late afternoon. So this is fun, because if you have Promethea moth females, you can put them in your yard, as I do, hang them on a fuchsia plant or something, a hanging basket, and you can watch the males come in because it's daylight. And they look like black swallowtails, sort of. And they can maneuver, they can fly just as well as a black swallowtail because they got the same tiny little body, big wings, and so they can maneuver very quickly and outdo any bird going after them. The female just sits there, of course, and waits for him to mate with her. And if she doesn't mate that first night, she'll try the second night. Then she'll try the third night. And then usually she gets a little frustrated and flies off somewhere and may start laying infertile eggs and so on. But generally they get mated the first or second night. Now what about a butterfly or moth you get in the wild? Is it likely to be mated? Yeah, it is. Male butterflies are pretty quick to get their job done. So if you got females around, you can find a female anywhere, it's probably mated. Not necessarily, but 95% chance, I would say. She's mated. Yeah.
Other than showing up at the nature center here, do you have any tips for like egg wild?
Yeah, I do actually. I'm glad you mentioned that. If you want to find monarch eggs, you want to go out and find your own monarch eggs. Well, what do you want to do? You want to go out in the field of milkweed? Is that a good idea? No, not. You want to look for, somebody's got a weedy yard, and they got a milkweed sticking out of a hedge on the south side of the hedge. That milkweed is going to get monarchs coming by quite regularly because it's the only milkweed around. Okay? You want to look for that isolated milkweed plant. Now, if you're the one with the isolated milkweed plant in your yard, you're going to get monarch eggs. You'll be able to find them fairly easily. Same thing if you've got parsley plant. Perfect target for a black swallowtail. If a black swallowtail female comes through your yard, she's going to smell that and find it. So, yeah, will you get eggs all the time? No, but you'll get them. Every once in a while you'll find them. Now, where are the eggs laid? Are they always on the underside of the leaf? Most people think they are because they see monarchs doing it. No, they don't have to be. All swallowtails lay their eggs on the top of the leaf. So, it doesn't, you have to know where to look. And that's one of the wonderful things about butterflies is they're so different. The more you learn, the better you are at it. And the more interesting it becomes. And some butterflies are very challenging to raise. Don't get the idea that everything's like a monarch. Some of the most difficult ones are our angle-wing butterflies. The question mark butterfly. The mourning cloak butterfly. These are very, very susceptible to the nuclear polyhedrosis virus, and it's particularly bad in warm weather. These are all butterflies that migrate into cooler areas whenever they can. And they are found in greater numbers, high in northern locations more than southern locations. They're found all over the United States, but if you want to find the most of them, you keep going north. So these are particularly susceptible to that. And when I was a teenager, I raised 200 mourning cloaks, all from one batch of eggs. They lay their eggs in large batches. And I just happened to find one on a willow. I knew what it was. And some of them were parasitized. The eggs had little egg parasites inside of them. But a lot of them hatched, and they all grew at the same rate, and so they all matured exactly the same time. And so they all hatched out at the same time. And so I went out in the front porch of my house and dumped 200 mourning cloaks out there in the front, and they went everywhere. And it's so exciting. But it's fun to have a synchronized brood like that. And you can do that if you come here to the Nature Center, and I've got monarch eggs, because I often put 50 or 100 eggs in there. They'll all be raised, they'll all be within a day or two of each of being laid. So you're going to have a nice big brood all coming out of them. Yeah.
So, I mean, sometimes I can watch the monarchs going out there and laying the eggs, underneath the leaf of the milkweed. So So do you go out there and just cut the leaf off and put it in the hut?
Yeah, well, you have to understand how I get monarchs to begin with. I have no monarchs now. Nobody has any monarchs now. Why you can't winter them over here in Iowa? They need to go in the tropics for the winter. So how do I get my monarchs again? Same way you do it if you couldn't come here to the Nature Center. I have particular areas where I look, where milkweeds are in short supply, and it's the right habitat for them. Make sure the habitat's right. Open country, don't be looking at milkweeds in the middle of town for the first butterflies that come through. They're not going to stop in those places. That's for later in the year that they'll be coming in to town and laying eggs. They want to be in the kinds of habitats that they're most comfortable in the spring. So they will be in open areas. And I have places in those areas. I found places in those areas where they, where you have a good patch of milkweed, enough that the yard tax looking through them all, and none of them's round. And only I'm not gonna tell you where those are, but that's where I get my first eggs of the year. Now those first eggs of the year, they might have OEM, right? The disease I talked about. So how do I've got to produce all the eggs for all the nature centers, so I don't want to have OE. So what do? I give these a bleach treatment. 5% bleach solution for 1 minute and no more. And be careful with your measuring. That's 1 part of bleach to 19 parts of water. Make sure you get that exact. And exactly 1 minute. If you go too far, you dissolve the egg. If you don't do it far enough, the spores won't be killed. It's a task, and I don't like doing it, but it gets me clean butterflies so that I can then produce them in my insectary in cages where no other butterflies, no diseased butterflies are present. So all the females, all the eggs they lay, they're clean. And then I can distribute them, bring them here, everything else. I don't need to do any further treatment to the eggs that I get from that second generation. So that works really well. But it's always a lot of work to get that first few eggs, because there aren't many butterflies coming through them. They're at the lowest numbers. And are the butterflies that are coming through in May, it's going to be the first week of May, by the way, are those butterflies the ones that went south in the fall? No. None of those are. The ones that went south and roosted in Mexico, central Mexico, those ones came up and laid eggs as they traveled north and wore themselves out and died in Oklahoma and Texas. And that's where it stopped. Their progeny are the ones that come north and die. And there aren't that many. But they come through, and I'm waiting for them. And I spend a lot of time looking for those eggs, because if I'm really lucky, I'll get a butterfly. And it'll be clean. And I can get more eggs. But generally, I'm stuck with just what I can find on the milkweed plants. And they move pretty fast. They go right through here and go right up, keep going north. They're programmed to go north until about, I think, June 15th or so. And then by about August 15th, they're programmed to start flying south. They just programmed into their bodies. And how they find these places in Mexico is the fun part, because the areas in Mexico where these things roost are very special places. Remember, this is a tropical butterfly. It can't get frozen. Okay? It'll die if it freezes. Secondly, these roost in huge numbers. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of butterflies roosting on just a few trees. There's no food capable of feeding that many butterflies. So that area has to be cold enough that they don't use up their fat reserves, because they can't feed there. There just isn't enough food there. So it has to be an area cold enough to keep them from using up their fat reserves, and not cold enough to kill them. They know this by instinct. How? Nobody knows. But there's only about 8 sites in central Mexico where they find these spots. And once in a while, they get an ice storm or something there. That's what really dropped the monarch butterfly numbers way down. We don't have a lack of milkweed. Don't let anybody tell you we have a lack of milkweed and a lack of habitat. No, that is not true. That's people who want to sell you things saying that. The truth is, they were hit badly by a few winter storms down there when they're most vulnerable, when they're all roosting in a few spots. That's when damage happened to their numbers. And they're capable of building it back. They will eventually. But it's not a problem with lack of milkweed. We've got plenty of milkweed. Yeah.
There's a Pacific Grove over there around Monterey Bay and Carmel in California, and they have monarchs that winter there. Is that a true monarch?
Yes, it is. But they never interact with our eastern ones. Now, Florida also has monarchs that stay there. Don't migrate. Wherever you find monarchs that don't migrate, you're going to find an awful lot of disease I talked about. It's about 70% in Florida. And this is one of the great success stories of the monarch. First of all, here's what this monarch's doing. It's overwintering down in central Mexico, okay? It's roosting on those trees. It's coming northward. Now, some of those individuals are sick. They've got this protozoan parasite, right? But they're flying northward, and the ones that are most parasitized, most damaged, are not going to make it very far. So the most seriously damaged ones won't make it because this insect is migrating northward. All of them, not just part of them, all of them are coming out of Mexico northward. The ones that are healthiest will make it the farthest. Okay? Will lay the most eggs, so on. Not only that, not only do you have healthier monarchs coming northward, but the milkweed is coming up from the ground new. There is no spores on those milkweeds, okay? Totally different from the way it is in the fall, where all the milkweeds out there in the fields have been traveled over by monarchs all summer long. And you get a buildup of these spores on them. In the spring, everything is clean. Those monarchs are flying up over absolutely clean milkweed. Their relatives, all their relatives, down in the tropics, that never migrate, they're having to lay their eggs on milkweeds that are contaminated, badly contaminated. So their numbers never reach the monarchs. The monarch's the most successful member of that family because it migrates. It's a tremendous advantage that it has over all of its relatives. So here you have a tropical butterfly coming north into our area. Who would expect that? And I think this particular disease is of major importance because it's able to multiply only because and become so successful because it's able to fly northward over fresh milkweed and not be infected constantly the way the ones in the tropics are. It's interesting to think about that because a lot of people don't understand, okay, it's a butterfly that migrates. Why did it ever get started? And now you can begin to think how this might be a selected advantage to be able to fly northward like that, to work that out. How it ever got worked out, I don't know, but they may have started moving northward into northern areas which were cleaner and they had produced more progeny that way, and that was more successful for them, and evolutionarily it would increase until now they go up into Canada. Makes sense? Yeah.
In the fall, we seem like we have, it's happened twice, our trees are just dripping with monarchs. Just loaded.
If you're in a good spot, and often these are places that are semi-rural, they're fairly open, there aren't a lot of buildings around, you'll find trees that are selected by these migrating monarchs to roost on their way to Mexico. Now coming northward, they don't cluster like that. They never cluster like that coming northward. They're laying eggs and they go each individual butterfly for itself. They don't cluster up in trees. That's in the fall when they go north southward.
Last summer I found a Zabulon skipper over Hickory Hills. Is there a change of the range of some butterflies due to the change in the climate?
That's a good question. Are there changes in the climate? Changes in our climate causing butterflies to change their migration patterns or to move into new areas, and I think that's probably true, but there's not a lot of scientific evidence for that yet. I think we're accumulating that, and it's beginning to show. I think it's going to get a lot more obvious over the coming years here. Yeah.
One butterfly that seems to have done really well the last several summers is the hackberry emperor.
Yes.
Any comments on that?
The hackberry emperor is one of the brushfoot butterflies in Nymphalidae family, and all of those various butterflies have their years when they become very numerous, and other years when you can't hardly find one. Red admirals, I remember one spring when there were so many red admirals in my yard, I thought I had an infestation. There were probably 30 or 40 of them, and this was early in the spring because they were coming northward, and I don't know, we've never seen them like that before. And last year I had a hard time finding any. So sometimes these butterflies get very numerous. The Milbert's tortoiseshell is another one. Beautiful butterfly. And I've seen it only once in this area, and it was quite numerous, and I raised them, caterpillars and everything, and then all of a sudden, gone. And gone from Wisconsin, gone from all the other places I visit. And they'll be back. And what makes them come back, I don't know. A lot of it has to do with maybe parasite cycles that are going on, parasitoids in cycle with the butterflies involved. But I don't think it's that simple. It's hard to know, really. We see these things happen, and we wonder why. It's interesting, but we can't explain it. But a lot of those butterflies can be very numerous in certain years, and absolutely impossible to find otherwise. I haven't seen a Milbert tortoiseshell for years. But I know sooner or later I'm going to see a whole lot.